Hey everybody, um, man, this video is really hard to do because of the. So I was someone talk about the Russell Wilson trade, and I mean literally I don't know, it was like a couple weeks ago I made a video and said there's no way he's gonna be traded, and sure enough, as sports go and the NFL goes, he's traded. So, man, it's tough. Like I'm a Seahawks fan and I'm a PSG fan, so it's been a rough sports week for me. Probably one of the toughest sports week for me. Um, so yeah, a lot of humble pie about that one because, yeah, I didn't think Russ would be traded. I thought there was no way they would trade him, especially this year. There was all the reasons in the world not to trade him, and for whatever reason, they did it. So, as a quick summary, I just think terrible deal for the Seahawks. Terrible deal for the Seahawks. Very good deal for Denver. I think Denver, and I think it's a great situation for Russ because he's gonna be surrounded with a lot of talent offensively. I think they like Nathaniel Hackett, very offensive-minded coach. They're loaded wide receiver, running back. I think the O-line is not as good as. I guess there's question marks about the O-line, but I mean it's better than Seattle's. So, and Russ is used to functioning under O-lines that are not great. So, and I think there's a lot of, in Seattle, I think everybody's trying to cushion the blow by saying, well, he's 33, he's going to be 34, he's on the way down, you were going to have to pay him $50 million a year, all these things, right? And I think people are kind of wrong about this. First of all, I think Russ, he's a professional, man. Like, I'm so sad to see him leave because pros that are as professional as Russell Wilson are rare, but this guy, he never got trouble in Seattle, always a model example in the community. He never really had injury issues except last year when he accidentally hit his hand on Aaron Donald's helmet, which is like the freakiest accident that could happen to anybody, right? So, yeah. So, he's just the ultimate pro, super clutch. He was one of those guys like people I don't think gave him enough credit when the Seahawks did win because we would always be either losing or trailing, and then he'd bring us back in the fourth. And which was crazy was that most of the game we would run the ball, so he had very little rhythm. And but yeah, he was very, very good in the fourth quarter, very, very good in the fourth quarter, and in clutch situations. So yeah, for me, it's baffling that the Seahawks made this move, and I'm gonna explain, I think, why I think it happened. I think everybody's trying to figure it out. But essentially, my take on Seattle, why this is a terrible deal for them, is look, if you're gonna rebuild, you can rebuild next year, or in 2 years, or in 3 years, or in 4 years. It's like you got a prime franchise quarterback. I know on the national level, you guys are gonna say, well, he's only a top 10 quarterback, if that, right? Like, I don't know. When he's healthy, in the years before that, he was a top 5 quarterback. Halfway through last year, everybody thought he was an MVP candidate. Now, suddenly everybody's saying he's old, he's washed up, he's no good. That's a bunch of hooey. There's no way. Russell Wilson's got plenty of football fan. I can reassure Denver Broncos fan. I think you guys made a great deal. Just a great deal. This is a steal. You guys didn't even give up 3 first-round picks. It was 2 first, 2 second, and I forgot, and the 3 players, and I think a 5th-round pick or something. The 3 players are kind of a joke because, the only guy who's good is the tight end, and what's the point of getting a tight end if you got no one to throw him the ball to? It just makes no sense from the Seattle's perspective. The logic on Seattle's perspective is that, hey, if you got John Schneider and Pete Carroll build this thing up, if we tear it down, then we can build it back up like we did 10 years ago. But I just think, it's kind of unrealistic because, one, they had some of the most successful drafts in NFL history. And I think a lot of that had to do with Pete Carroll just coming out of college, right? So he knew the college scene very, very well. The other thing, I think the rules were different back then. And, you know, you could play a more defensive style of football. And so you could build a team around defense. I think today, in today's game, you can still build around defense, but it better be, I think, the guys who have the biggest impact on defenses are usually defensive linemen. You look at Aaron Donald, for example. I think Leonard Floyd, you know, Von Miller, you got to get to the quarterback, because in the secondary, you can't really be as physical as they used to. And I think that was one of the problems. I think the Legion of Boom is why they dipped a little bit after the second Super Bowl. You know, we're still a very good defenses, but those 2 years and the year before that, I mean, they were elite of elite in terms of defense. After that, I think they were first in terms of points allowed a couple of years in a row, but they were just not as dominant. And then it just swiftly dipped. And I mean, the past 4 years, the defense has been terrible, especially the first 6 weeks of the year. It was terrible, and then suddenly in the second half, it would always get better. And it's like, why didn't we just start the season like that? Every year we have to start the season terribly, and our defense are always terrible. And you knew it wasn't the talent or the players, that it was the coaching, because it would always get fixed. And it's like the guys didn't know their assignment until week 6 or week 8, and it's like we're always behind the 8 ball. So anyways, I'm getting a little bit distracted here, but off track. But the bottom line is this, is that for Seattle, like the reason this deal got made was it was about egos. Essentially, Russell Wilson has a big ego in the sense that he wants to be the man. He wants the team to be around him. He wants to have a huge legacy. He wants to be remembered as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, right? And he knew that with Pete Carroll and his shackled offense, it was just never going to happen, because Pete Carroll's in love with running the football, and he just didn't want to. And he's also in love with playing complementary offensive football, which means you never turn the ball over. So that, because he doesn't like turning the ball over, because no coach likes to turn the ball over, but he likes to play off his defense. And I think in the early 2010s, great approach. In today's game, you got to be aggressive offensively. Like, you got to be aggressive offensively. So that's why Russ went to an offensive head coach, because in Denver, and that's why he wanted to go to Denver, because he's got loads of weapons. And not only that, but he's going to get finally the offensive system that allows him to put up big numbers. And I think he wants to be remembered one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. And so he wants to be a big part of that offense and a big part of the team. And his idea of, sitting for 40 minutes because your defense is just, giving up record yardages every year and barely seeing the ball. Like, he was just tired of it. He was tired of having cheap offensive lines in front of him. And to be honest with me, it's like, dude, you're investing $30+ million in your quarterback. It's like, yeah, you got to make him a big part of your team. He's got to be the central focus of the team, and you got to build the team around him. And I just don't understand. And Pete Carroll just was so stubborn. He never wanted to waver from his philosophy. And so essentially, they just kept butting head, and Russell Wilson is like, look, I'm not getting any younger here. We're not winning because we're not playing. Like, either you cater to your star quarterback, or you trade him. And so they decided to trade him. And I just think that's it's kind of like what happened in Green Bay, right? Either you cater to Aaron Rodgers or you get rid of him. And it's stupid. Like, the Packers made the right decision. The Packers are going to pay Aaron Rodgers $50 million. And that's the right thing to do, because I don't know how many times he's been MVP, but he's won at least 2 MVPs, and he won it last year. Like these types of quarterbacks, like, man, they come, like, in Seattle, in 50 years, we've only had one, and we just traded him. Like, I'm upset. Like, this was a steal for Denver. Like, great move by Denver. But, look at the 49ers. Montana, then they had Steve Young, and then ever since then, it's been a drought, right? It's like a 22-year drought. You had Kaepernick for 1 year where you thought he would be the thing. That's the other thing. How many quarterbacks are good for 1, 2, 3, 4 years and then just fall off the cliff? It's like there's so many of those guys. Russell Wilson, for the past 10 years, 8 winning seasons. 8 winning seasons in Seattle. 2 Super Bowl appearances, and I think the reason why he didn't get back to the Super Bowl had nothing to do with him. He was the one thing that was working well in Seattle. So the bottom line is Russell Wilson. And look, Russell Wilson, if you're going to pay a guy 30, 50 million, right? It's normal that the guy has a big ego, right? Because he understands that, like he's the guy, that he's not getting paid for it to do nothing, right? I would be worried if the guy tells me, you know, hey, I want to make $50 million, but I want less responsibility, right? That doesn't make sense. So I think, I don't want to be the greatest quarterback. I want to play off my defense and, just, dump the ball 5 yards every time, like, dump the ball underneath all the time. I mean, hit my check downs all the time. That's not what a franchise quarterback does. So, like, that's why I totally get Russell Wilson's mindset. It's like, hey, I'm a great quarterback. I know I'm a great quarterback. Give me a chance to do what I'm great at, and put the pieces around me, make this team and build it around me. I mean, you're paying me $35 million. It's like, we got to make it work around me. And Pete Carroll just would not do that. And so then, I think this is the tragedy of it, is this happens, right after Paul Allen's death. And if Paul Allen had still been here, there's no way he makes the decisions the Seahawks made. Because essentially they would have gone to Paul Allen. And they would have said, it's either the 70-year-old coach, almost 71-year-old coach, or Russell Wilson. Right? And Paul Allen would have been like, okay, like, figure it out. Like, figure it out. Let's make it work together. And if we can't, I'm gonna let Pete Carroll go, and I'm gonna go get Sean Payton or an offensive coach or something. Because the thing is, this is like, what's more valuable in today's game? Like, is it having like a franchise quarterback for 5 years, or is it having a 71-year-old coach for 5 years? It makes no sense. You keep the quarter. Like, the reason the Patriots let go of Tom Brady is because he was 42, right? They knew he was going to retire any year, and even then, that was a very hard decision for them. Russell Wilson's 33, and he takes amazingly good care of his body. And last year was a freak injury. His first injury in his career that kept him out. Even Brady had the torn ACL when he was like in his late 20s. So, to me, it's insane, because this was just a clash of ego, and that's why he's not in Seattle anymore. And people are saying, well, he's less mobile. He's a dual threat quarterback. Like, all that's rubbish. Like, I saw him last year. He looked good in terms of running the football. It's just, in terms of throwing, he was off rhythm. You could tell. He missed 4 weeks. And then it took him a little bit of time to come back. And then when he did come back, they had some very tough games, versus the Rams and so forth. So they had a lot of problems, again, on defense. Like, man, they gave up so many yards. Like, every game, our time of possession was, I think we had the worst time of possession in the league by far. Right? So, I'm ranting, but it's like, I'm so frustrated, because it's just such a bad deal. And like I said, you can rebuild, and if next year they stunk, if Russell Wilson's healthy all year, you cater to him, you build a system around him, and he still stunk, like the Seahawks stunk, then I would give you that. But a year ago, we won 12 games. Our roster wasn't that much different. So, yeah, I'm livid. I just can't. I don't understand the situation. Every team in the NFL is trying to get that franchise quarterback, and we just traded him for, 9th pick in the draft, which is a nice pick in a year where there's no quarterbacks in the draft, right? Next year it's going to be like a 31st. I guess we'll have a high pick because we're going to be awful next year. But, at best case scenario, the Seahawks are relevant again in 3 years. That's best case. If everything goes right, more than likely it's going to take at least 5 years. And that's to become relevant, which you already were with Russell Wilson. The chances that you build a Super Bowl winner, that you bring in like a quarterback that's going to be that kind of talent that could carry a franchise for 8 more years. I mean, the odds are just very, very small. Very small. There's not that many of those guys in this league right now. So, yeah. So anyways, it was between, like I said, if Paul hadn't been here, he would have either gone and got Sean Payton, or an awesome offensive coach mindset. If he felt like the clash could not be resolved, he would have first tried to resolve the clash. If it hadn't been resolved, he would have gotten a really good head coach. Like, he would have done what he had to do. You know, he went and got Mike Holmgren. He went and got Pete Carroll. He would have gotten somebody else. But Jody Allen, she doesn't know anything about football, as far as I know. And so she just made a terrible decision. But essentially, I think in her mind, what it was, it's like this. I don't know anything about football. I can keep the quarterback, and then I got to rebuild the whole structure of the organization, because you're getting rid of Pete Carroll and probably John Schneider. Or I keep Pete Carroll and John Schneider, and I get rid of the quarterback, and I let him handle him. And if it's not good, if it's not worked out in 3 years, well, we're probably gonna have new ownership anyway, because I think she's trying to sell. And you're seeing what she's doing in Portland. I mean, they've literally everything except Damian Lillard. They got rid of everybody except Damian Lillard. So essentially, it just seems like she's like, you know, I'm cutting all the spending. We'll see how much they spend this year, but I bet you anything, the Seahawks aren't going to meet the cap. They're going to save money, and the reason is going to be like, well, we're going to save it down the road when we need it to re-sign players and so forth. But I think Jody Allen likes the idea that she doesn't have to spend that money until the Seahawks are sold. And that's what she's going to try to do. She's going to try to sell the Seahawks. And we'll see about the Blazers, but I wouldn't be surprised if she sold the Blazers too. So, but anyways, I just think from a sports perspective, a competitive perspective, you know, it's like Michael Jordan said, it's like rebuilding. I mean, there's no guarantees, you know, there's no guarantees you're going to be good at rebuilding. You know, the Chicago Cubs have been rebuilding for 42 years. Like, the Seahawks were like that. Before Russell Wilson, except those, you know, there was 2 years of Mike Holmgren where the Seahawks were really good. Except for that, I mean, we've been nobodies in this league. We've done nothing. It was like 1 or 2 playoff appearances every decade. Our best quarterback was Matt Hasselbeck. Like, in our franchise history, I think we had Jim Zorn, we had Steve Largent, we had a few Cortez Kennedy, we had a few really good players, but man, it's like you just tore down the franchise overnight for, you know, a really good first-round pick and another not-so-good first-round pick, 3 players that I can care less about, and 2 second-round picks. Right. By the way, the Jamal Adams trade that we made for 2 first-round picks, it almost looks like you traded Russell Wilson for Jamal Adams. That's what this trade looks like. Like, it's like, I mean, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing? Like, it's just a terrible, terrible, terrible deal for the Seahawks. Like, this notion that you're just going to build it back. I mean, look, if they build it back up in 3 years and they're great, I'll apologize and I'll be gladly happy. But the odds of that are just like, man, you cannot disrespect sports like you do by making this move. You can't disrespect the game like that and think, you know, think good things are going to happen. When you got once in a generation type talent, you do everything to make that guy like to make him as good as possible, to put him in the best conditions as possible. Like, there are guys, and I'm going to talk about some star players that are divas in my next video when I talk about PSG. But there are guys that are like that are divas in this league, and they don't produce, right? Like, you know, they get paid and they don't. That's not Russell Wilson. Like, Russell Wilson's ego is motivated by wanting to be great. It's a lot like Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, I got no problem with that. Like if you should want to be great. Like, you should want to be great. You know, if you got that kind of talent, like Russell Wilson, yeah, he does a lot of stuff, you know, commercials and all this stuff, Instagram, you know, the media, all that, his image, all that. But outside of that, like on the field, he's always delivered. Like, last year was the first year he didn't deliver, and he was out, and you could tell he was just struggling because he was out of rhythm, because his thumb was hurt, his finger was hurt. I just think to move on from a guy that has such high character like Russell Wilson after 1 year, and even last year, like I think, I don't know this, I think 25 touchdown passes, 6 interception in 13 games. Like, that's not, I mean, that is not like, that's his worst season. Like, and we're acting like this was Russell Wilson's, I mean, it's ridiculous. So, in short, I mean, I was wrong about Russell Wilson not being traded, but man, I'm not, like, I still think I was dead right on this. And you know, John Clayton, it's funny, John Clayton said the same thing. It's like, you know, quarterbacks that win you 5+ games in this league, they just never get traded. So that's why everybody thought this was rubbish. You know, if anything, the guy who had to go was Pete. And now we got a 71-year-old coach. We got no talent on this roster because, you know, the veterans are all going to get, I mean, they already cut Bobby Wagner. Yeah, it's, I think it's, man, it's kind of like Bill Belichick says, though. Maybe, you know, it's better to move on from a guy 3 years, you know, a few years too early than a few years too late. But I think in this case, I'd rather move on a little too late, because at least you give your another shot at the Super Bowl or a playoff appearance or whatever. You're relevant. Like, once you make the playoff, anything can happen. And the Seahawks had a terrible schedule this year in terms of they had easy opponents. So there's all the chances you make it to the playoffs, and then you make it to the playoff. Look, anything can happen. And I just think, man, just to move on like that from a franchise quarterback. Like, I mean, Russell Wilson is the Seahawks. Like, I get that there's, without the Legion of Boom and all that, there's no Super Bowl. And I want to give the Legion of Boom their credit. I mean, they're amazing. Marshawn Lynch, all that was amazing in Seattle. So it's not just been Russell Wilson. I'm not saying that, but like, the 2 years prior to Russell Wilson got here with the Legion of Boom, they were 7-9, right? They had Marshawn Lynch, they were 7-9. You put Russell Wilson on that team, 11 wins, 13 wins, 12 wins, right? And then after that, the roster construction the past few years has not been good. And that's not Russell Wilson's fault. So, and what's crazy about this is the return you get for Russell Wilson is, you know, it's almost equivalent to the Jamal Adams trade. Like, I think, you know, a couple second-round picks. That's it. That's the difference. You know, and it bothers me so much because I really think it had to do. I think the person who's most responsible for this is Jody Allen. And she's a new owner. She doesn't know what she's doing. And I think she's more financially interested in the Seahawks. I don't think she cares about the state of the franchise or the state of the Portland Trail Blazers. I don't think she cares about the sports aspects. I think she cares about the financial aspects and the Paul Allen estate. You know, I think that's her main responsibility, just handling the financial money. But it's just sports-wise, it's a terrible decision. And man, yeah, I'm upset. I'm upset. I'm so upset about this because like, so many good memories of Russell Wilson. And like, I mean, look, if he's terrible in Denver, we'll see quickly who was right, who was wrong. If he's terrible in Denver, then, you know, I'll say the Seahawks were right for letting him go. But man, he could be playing at a really great level for at least 7 years. And if you moved on from that too early, and you don't find that franchise quarterback in the next 3 years, I mean, right now our quarterback's what? Drew Lock? Drew Lock, and the guy's a bum. Like, no offense, but man, like you gotta understand. Like, I've been a Seattle fan since I was 7 years old, right? So I'm 33. Like, you know, so that's 26 years. In 26 years, the first 16 years, except for that Super Bowl appearance, the Seahawks have been a joke. They've been a joke, except for those 16, except for that Super Bowl appearance. And you just, and then Russell Wilson comes on. We have 8 out of 10 seasons where we make the playoffs, and we're talking about every single one of those 10 seasons. We're talking about how this team's a Super Bowl contender. Now we're going into a rebuild, complete rebuild, that could take 3 to 5 years. Best case scenario. I mean, look at the Jets. Look at the Chicago Bears. Look at, I mean, the Jaguars. Like, they drafted Trevor Lawrence. Did Trevor Lawrence look good last year? No. He looked awful. So it's like the Jets, they've never had a quarterback. The Bears never had a, I mean, who's the best quarterback in Jets history? Is it Vinny Testaverde? I mean, in the modern era, right? Vinny Testaverde? Like, I mean, you know, or Chad Pennington? I mean, dude, there's so many of these franchises that just haven't had good quarterback play. Right? It's taking them forever to get a quarterback. And you just traded one of the best ones to ever do it. Like Russell Wilson's, you know, he's not in that first year. He's not in that Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. He wants to be, but he's not. But he's gonna be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And you look at how many games he's won since he's came into this league. Like, he's one of the winningest quarterbacks in his first 10 years. So you look at his QB ratings. I mean, his touchdown to interception ratios. I mean, it's nuts. High character, great leader. I mean, everything you want. And the fact that he wanted more responsibility, that he wanted an offense more catered to his skill set, that would make him excel. Like, I don't give a you know what about the fact it doesn't play off your defense. Your defense, no matter what we did with your defense last year, was terrible. The past 4 years, our defense has been terrible. We've been leaking yards like nuts. It's like their approach in defense has been terrible, and they even admitted it because they fired pretty much a lot of the coaching staff, right? And even Pete Carroll said they were too cocky in their approach with defense and too much base defense or whatever. So anyway, this video is running on way too long, but I just want to say, man, hey, 3, thank you so much, Russ, for all the years, and man, I'm gonna miss you so bad. Like, I mean, I hope I don't. I hope we're great next year, but man. Anyways, big thank you, Russell Wilson. I wish him all the best. I can't root for Denver. I can't. It's just, as a Seahawks fan, it's tough. It's just, but because the thing is, if he's amazing in Denver for the next 7 years, I mean, I'm never gonna forgive Pete Carroll and John Schneider for doing that. Like, as much as they built this whole thing, like, oh man, for tearing it down like that, like. Anyways, I'm done. Thank you, Russ. Best of luck, and let's hope Seahawks are contending again soon. All right, peace, guys.